Well, the skies between India and China finally open again. After nearly 5 years of suspension, direct flights have resumed, a move both nations are calling a positive step to rebuild people-to-people ties and boost tourism. Hello and welcome to another episode of Deep Dive on NewsX with me, Vineet Malhotra. For the first time since 2020, a commercial flight from Kolkata to Guangzhou will be in the air, marking a cautious yet symbolic reset in the relationship. The last direct flight between India and China operated in early 2020, just before the pandemic shut down borders worldwide. What began as a health precaution soon turned political. The Galwan Valley clashes that year plunged ties to their lowest point in decades. As tensions rose, all direct air connectivity was halted. The result was a 5-year void, no regular passenger flights, disrupted student travel, and a near standstill in tourism and business exchanges. That silence in the skies became a symbol of how deep the diplomatic freeze had set in. Fast forward to October 2025, Indigo finally gets the go-ahead. The first service takes off from Kolkata to Guangzhou at 10 p.m., reconnecting two major commercial hubs. It's a limited restart for now, with China Eastern Airlines expected to resume Shanghai to Delhi services in November. Officials describe this as a phased resumption, beginning with a few weekly flights and gradually expanding depending on demand. Aviation authorities from both sides coordinated for months, ironing out safety protocols, slot schedules, and reciprocal permissions. For passengers, mostly students and business travelers, the sight of a boarding gate marked Guangzhou after 5 years is almost surreal. And among the first travelers on today's direct flight are Indian students, business travelers, and professionals who previously had to rely on indirect flights, long stopovers, or chartered services to reach China. Before 2020, tens of thousands of Indian medical and engineering students studied in China, and while travel continued during the hiatus. Direct connectivity will now save time, reduce travel costs, and simplify logistics for them. Small business owners, import-export agents, and IT professionals also benefit, resuming face-to-face meetings more efficiently. Chinese officials say that the flights are expected to revive bilateral exchanges and tourism, and airlines anticipate stronger traffic as visa processing and schedules will normalize. Beijing has publicly welcomed the restart. The Chinese Foreign Ministry called the resumption a positive measure to promote friendly ties and enhance people-to-people exchanges. The statement underlined that both sides should work together to create the right atmosphere for improved relations. Diplomatic observers say that this is not just about aviation, it's about optics. After years of friction over border issues, trade deficits, and security mistrust, the return of direct flights sends a message that cautious engagement is back on the table. India, for its part, has framed it as a practical, technical step rather than a political gesture. But in geopolitics, such practical steps often open doors to larger resets. The flight announcements comes alongside a gradual warming trend. Military disengagement has quietly continued at some friction points. Trade volumes have started to rebound, and cultural exchanges are being discussed once again. Officials have met at the SCO and BRICS forums, keeping communication lines open. Analysts believe this limited reopening could lay the groundwork for broader cooperation in commerce, tourism, and even regional connectivity. Yet both capitals remain cautious. Trust is fragile, and the aviation restart will be closely watched for how smoothly it runs. The restart of India-China flights may look like a simple aviation update, but it's far more than that. For thousands separated by distance and diplomacy, it's a reconnection, a chance to rebuild lost links efficiently and safely. Whether this renewed connectivity leads to deeper cooperation or merely coexists with strategic rivalry will depend on what both sides do next. But for now, after 5 long years, the engines are running, the routes are open, and the skies between Delhi, Kolkata, Shanghai, and Guangzhou are alive again. Let's talk about this with our guest. Joining us on the show is Professor Madhav Nalapat, Editorial Director of the Sunday Guardian. Professor Nalapat, I'm sure you're also as optimistic as I am. But, taking some perspective out of what has transpired in geopolitics over the last few months, I personally, as a journalist, also feel that the friction, or rather, the equation we have had with the Americans and Donald Trump related to tariffs, and the animosity that has set in between the United States and India was also largely or partly responsible for China and India looking at this route altogether once again. Professor Nalapat.
Yeah, Vineet, that's a very interesting surmise. I'd like to point out that China has direct flights to a number of countries, the U.S., Canada, Australia, Japan. I mean, all the countries in Europe, almost all the countries in North America, almost all the countries in South America, almost all the countries in Asia, and most of the countries in Africa. So restarting flights between India and China is not unusual. What does raise eyebrows a little bit is the fact that the first flight is from Kolkata to Guangzhou. Now, I'm very certain that we have some very able people concerned with security, Home Minister Shah, National Security Advisor Doval. We'll be keeping a close eye on all, especially you mentioned drug smuggling and other activities. The reality is that Kolkata is the capital of West Bengal, and West Bengal has got a huge population of Bangladeshis, many of whom have got Indian identity papers and who are basically de facto Indian citizens, de jure also, if I may point out. So it is a little unusual that the first flight was Calcutta to Guangzhou, but possibly because of short distance involved. I would have expected a flight from Delhi to Beijing. Right? I would have expected a flight maybe from Mumbai to Shanghai, but Kolkata to Guangzhou, I did not expect. As for whether there will be a reset in relations or not, Vineet, well, the future will tell. The reality of the situation is the Chinese have not budged from the existing lines of control that they have. They have not budged all these 5 years, and they're not likely to budge in the future as well, unless some extraordinary situation takes place. So, having said that, I'd like to point out that this flight by itself is fine. There's no problem in it. As I mentioned, there are direct flights in China and all the countries. We're talking about the United States. There are many direct flights between China and the United States. So are they between China and Canada, China and the UK, China and Europe. All these countries are closely linked to China by flights. There's no harm in India also joining that list. And otherwise, we were actually the odd man out in not having direct flights. I would say that it's in the Chinese interest to ensure a reset in relations. It's in the Chinese interest. Well, if they're not willing to surrender what territory they have, at least demilitarize on the border zone and keep the peace. Because the reality is that India is a very consequential country of the present and the future. And for that reason, I'd like to point out that good relations with India will be of benefit to China. I'd only like to say that there is some political risk involved, assuming that something goes wrong. I'm sure the many opposition parties will seize on this and try and paint the Modi government as soft on China or whatever. It's nothing of the kind. It's a routine exercise. I mean, China has so many flights with Taiwan. The Taiwanese government cannot be accused of being soft on China, nor can China be accused of changing its policy of takeover of Taiwan. So having said that, I just like to point out that we do need to exercise a certain amount of caution, especially given the very interesting nature of the two cities involved, Kolkata and Guangzhou. But with that caveat, I'd also like to hope that relations will improve between the two giants of Asia beneath.
All right, Professor Nalapat, appreciate your thoughts and the way you have synopsized this development. Thank you so much. We take a short break on that note. We'll be right back.